Alright, high tier players, it's season 2 for Marvel Rivals, and what a new season of gifts and rewards. A new season of joy, a new season where everyone is once again stricken with new hero syndrome and a bunch of people are spamming a role they have no idea how to play because until Diamond Mommy came along, they were all looking at us like we were the freak show. But it's okay, it's fine. We just have to do what high tier players do, right? Analyze, adjust, execute. As a Flex Eternity player, it is my sworn duty to make a video for every hero type from high level, first-hand perspective and expertise in the hopes that I can educate the masses to make all our games a little less unbearable. Now, before we get into the ranked specific stuff, which won't be all that long because of how weird the ladder in the game is right now at the season start, there's just one thing that everyone needs to understand as Vanguards or even melee DPS if you want to win more games. Press W almost all of the time. That's it. I don't care what type you choose, go. Now, hurry. The only time you should not be doing this is when a bunch of your team just wiped, or if doing so would put you around a corner that breaks your support's line of sight or something like that. Vanguards have one job, and that is getting enemy attention in the form of attacks and abilities focused on them in a way that allows positioning either on or forward to take the objective. In MMORPGs, tanks have some form of provoke ability, which causes enemies to focus them. This game is PvP, so instead of a provoke mechanic, which would probably be way too powerful of a disable, we have to create enough damage pressure to force enemy responses if they don't want to lose the point or their lives. The amount of games that are lost just because people can't tell the front line isn't strong enough, and that's why you aren't able to offer any resistance to enemy attacks, is just pathetic. I mean, Dunning-Kruger is a hell of a syndrome, but god damn, the ratios here are far worse than normal. Usually you have this nice little distribution model shape that causes the Dunning-Kruger sufferers to be clumped up in this little middle area here. Well, in Marvel Rivals, indisputably, the system pushes you to Celestial 3, and after the rank changes for Season 2, we're not even sure that's the limit anymore. It depends on how much the stat spamming adds at Celestial, which is going to take some time for people up there who are also willing to share their data so we can get an accurate picture of just how this is working. Prefacing this entire class overview, this entire genre's roles come from World of Warcraft and MMORPGs in general. These are not just my personal takes or something abstract like that. These are well-established, indisputable facts that you can find echoed in any top player's class overview. Denial of any of this video's class basics and playstyle knowledge, even in the slightest, could be why you're getting stuck where you're stuck. So, for Vanguards, this category right now consists of 4 distinct playstyle types: Shield, Mobile Melee, Dive, and Anti-Dive. The easiest way to determine what category each pick belongs in is to draw 2 concentric circles around the battle center based on positioning of all players. Each category creates space by having one of these zones as a specialty for their kit to work particularly well in. While they can usually pull off operating in these other zones at least for a period of time, there are indisputably ranges and environments in which these types are particularly good at compared to other surroundings. First up, shield tanks. This is probably what would be considered the standard tank. Standard mentalities apply, standard strategies work, etc. Anyone that was remotely good at Reinhardt in Overwatch is already going to be good at these. These tanks are characterized by slow or floaty movement only and having a large, high damage absorption shield as part of the kit. These tanks specialize in traveling back and forth between the 2 sides of the inner circle. Just stay within 20 meters or so of the objective, and only in the case of steamrolling and you being in a position to hold them at some crucial checkpoint further ahead, would you bother to go further than that in almost all cases. These tanks are particularly good at dealing with poke, with Magneto standing out particularly thanks to his bubble ability as someone who can also perform a decent enough anti-dive and dive assist role. They are not, however, good into melee attackers, brawlers, or against projectile spam like a Punisher turret versus Groot walls or Strange shield. Your damage block number might be high, but all of that was useless fluff and you were actually worthless and feeding. You need to change to something like dive if they set up something like a spamming choke point and use a flank route to get your attacks in. The last thing to note is their ultimates are all different in terms of when to optimally use them, despite them all having the same optimal playstyle. Groot, for example, his ultimate should be used to start a team fight. This will either force enemy strategist ults, which first allows you to open up a window for your strategist ults to counter, or it will set up ultimates like if you have a Namor with a very AoE aim-dependent ability to maximize effect on targets. If you're lucky, you can of course just pick off squishies with it, but nobody needs advice on when you're wind stomping. They need help on those games where the enemies aren't stupid and require some brain to beat. Strange's ultimate should be used to set up large AoE ultimates like Scarlet Witch or Storm, or anything that works similar to theirs. You, of course, can also pick off squishies with it, and unlike Groot's ult, if you disabled the strategists, there's no chance for them to counter with their ult's abilities. So it's more of a viable usage since you have a lot easier time securing the picks. Magneto's ultimate should be used exclusively to skill shot enemy healers as soon as they have used their ultimate. There are counterplays you can do to absorb and counter Punisher or Star-Lord ults as well, but this is extremely hard to pull off, and without the coordination, as a duelist, they can just opt to outshoot and blow up your meteor, rendering your ult useless, while theirs still has a large chunk of its duration left, and now your team is completely defenseless against it. It's just better to let strategists counter those. Now it's time to get more up close and personal with the mobile melee. Now, as the name implies, the mobile melee playstyle tend to have more mobility than the first category, and mostly a melee range kit. Since you don't have defensive-oriented abilities, sitting around the objective and the team are not going to be your optimal zones. This group should live in the enemy backline, or the outer circle of the battle formation. The key difference between this group and the next group, Dive, is that this group lacks the extra tier of mobility that allows you to cover huge distances in just like a second. This means your threshold for "I need to get out now" needs to be a lot sooner than a dive tank. A Venom can and should push it to the limit to how low he can get his HP before he swings away. If a Captain America waited to leave until his HP was as low as a Venom before he leaves a battle, he's just going to end up feeding. The other thing to keep in mind is because these picks are not defensive oriented, they are terrible into a lot of damage heavy situations. If the enemy team is good enough defensively to keep you from getting value while also not letting their own frontline fall, you're effectively going to be useless and need to switch to something with much better sustain to get value. People staying on these picks into bad situations like that are frequently the cause of what I referred to earlier as weak frontline games, which are the ones where you don't get to leave the spawn. Since they are basically big melee duelists, their ultimates increase their lethality and ability to do their jobs better through a dual benefit of better damage and survivability. These are best used to secure picks on squishies. Next up is Dive. This one is incredibly short because dive tanks are played just the same as dive duelists. They should live in the battle's outer circle and keep harassing the enemy squishies. In Thor's case, his ultimate is best used to secure picks or follow up in a combo, while in Venom's case, he wants to start fights or start a combo with his. Just like Duelist Dive, these guys don't do well into anti-dive comps and end up becoming food if the enemy has built themselves around countering these tactics. Last is anti-dive. This last type is another inner circle formation specialist, just like shield tanks, but they have a lot less shields than the shield group, since most of their kit is built around bursting down targets that get too close to their lethal zone. Penny obviously does this with her mines, and especially her nest, while Emma's disable projectile travels so fast that close up, it's nearly instantaneous. There's no time to react. The only option once you're hit is to leave the zone extremely fast, which means they likely don't get any value, or they just end up feeding and become food once they're bursted down and instantly deleted. Penny's ultimate is a general space-making type of ult that I find most useful for starting battles through forcing enemy strategist ults to happen first. Emma's, on the other hand, is more like a directional strange ult and should be used to set up and combo with your teammates. Follow-up ultimates like Namor, Iron Man, etc. are nasty when the disable is fully active. These types absolutely lose against strong poke though. Change to stronger shields in that situation. Now, the next part of this video is tricky. I have to give ranked advice in a ladder that is currently all squished down 3 entire leagues. I may do a future updated video once the ranks settle more, but for right now I'll try to give the best advice I can. I shall also compress my advice just like the ranks are. First is Metal Leagues. All Metal Leagues right now consist of bottom half Celestials or lower. This is the group that will most likely have the weakest front lines, people that straight up lose because they picked badly and never changed, or who don't operate in their optimal battle zones and end up as food. This is where most Dunning-Kruger exists, and it shows in the quality of matches you get, which everybody knows you can measure using the consistency of skill you see in your teams. More random, bad quality, more Dunning-Kruger present. For this group, pay attention to the basics of what type of Vanguard you picked into the enemy composition. This, I know it seems like an extremely basic thing, but you would not believe how much this affects your efficacy. Every group was addressed at the beginning of the video when I said to press W more, unless that puts you out of position where you can no longer be healed, and that is especially true in this group. Now, there are a lot of games at this lower level where the healers aren't healing you at all, and you're food because of that. Yes, I agree, that does happen. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still keep going in though. Them being too stupid and bad to realize that them not healing you is why you have a high death number, despite the fact that you were right next to them, doesn't mean that you were bad, no matter how likely it is that those people are probably the very ones throwing all the criticism your way, even though they were the problem. Them not doing their job doesn't mean you stop doing yours properly. Stop caring so much about what the scorecard optics are like and why, it's drawing you criticism. Get better at the game instead. This is one of the reasons, by the way, I think Vanguards are so rare, because most people are actually too stupid to read the scorecard properly, and they don't realize that the numbers that the score gives you, it's mostly worthless data, and it's all time specific and scenario specific. You have to use those kinds of parameters in order to necessarily frame the data in any meaningful way. Vanguards are the one category where you basically can't count their deaths unless they were consistently and ridiculously out of position, because that death counter is going to be entirely dependent on how good the strategists were. The last piece of advice for this group is the lower in the group that you are below Celestial, the more you should slide your playstyle towards aggressive duelist and dive types. Here's why. One of the most fundamental interactions that you need to understand to be high up at this type of game is that aggression equals pressure, and pressure level equals skill level check. It's the most fundamental and foundational principle in making a stalemate game stop being a stalemate and start going your way. It's really pretty much just based on whoever manages to be more overly aggressive in the most coordinated way. As a former pro of RTS, shooters, fighters, MMOs, and MOBAs, I'll tell you that this is exactly how it worked in the team hero shooter genre as well. There's absolutely no difference in methods, implementation, or mentalities. It's the same tactics applied using the Marvel rival systems. That's all. It will win you a higher percentage of games if you are applying a higher amount of consistent pressure to an enemy's backline and squishies, because the picks are easiest to secure. Now, obviously, if you aren't being healed at all, despite you being completely in proper position, you may have to adjust to something like a longer range, like a Magneto, so you can still stay alive while poking any mid-range squishies that wander too close. Again though, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't try the aggressive option first. Aggression equals space, and making space is your primary purpose for existence. All right, time for mid to upper Celestial and Eternity above. Now, y'all don't really need all that much advice here, as you already mastered the basics, and you don't need to be told simple stuff like your optimal distancing for your pick anymore. Here, it's a lot more about ultimate usage, just like it is with strategists, since every enemy is going to be on average better at the teamwork and picking properly than the lower group. Every Magneto ultimate, for example, needs to successfully end a strategist ultimate almost as soon as it started. Every Strange or Thing ult needs to hit a lot of enemies in the disable and guarantee a pick or two in the duration of that disable. These timing windows are all small, but crucial to turning the tides and managing victory. Well, that does it for now. I hope this gets out there to enough in this new hero wave that we raise the bar just a bit, because nobody likes games where you can't even get out of the spawn. As addressed in prior videos, some of that is indeed the AI matchmaker, but there is still enough of a decent gray area that you can tip in your favor enough to have over a 50% win rate. And the system is built so you don't even really need that high of a win rate to climb. I am here and will continue to be here to help you claim as much of that real estate as possible. So, until next time, stay on that high tier, players. You can just ask Emma Frost. The view from up here is always worth it.